Good morning, Allison.
Oh,
No, we can't put it in there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Hi
Everyone
there.
is connecting. I know everyone's coming in from all over the world. Marina, should we just dive in or should we wait another minute to let people come in?
We can wait for 1 or 2 minutes.
Perfect. You just give us the
In the
thumbs up.
meantime, okay, in the meantime, welcome everyone and feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat.
Oh, shit. Hmm.
See a lot of people from many parts of the world. Honduras, Alaska. Welcome everyone. Costa Rica, Madagascar.
Wow,
Very nice to have such a diverse community.
that's fantastic.
It's great, yes.
Thank you all so much for taking the time to join our webinar.
Zimbabwe now. Switzerland, Portugal. Yeah, that's nice.
We're here in Costa Rica, which we'll be describing more about in our talk, but I'm excited to see there's other people from Costa Rica joining.
I think we can start. We have 42 participants now.
Excellent.
Okay.
Well, with that, let's dive right in. We want to start with a huge thank you to Restore for the invitation to deliver this webinar. We'd also like to thank ETH Zurich and the Cornell Lab and Global Experiments Network. And we'd also like to thank Dr. Rebecca Cole, who works for the Cornell Lab and is also the owner and director of Loma Linda Field Station here in this area. And she was the one that put us forward as speakers for this webinar. And of course, thank you to the Cornell Lab. We're grateful to be part of the eBird Costa Rica reviewers team, and we'll be describing later what that means. So we'll dive in with who we are. We haven't said who we are yet, but we'll share that. Talk about the eBird and Merlin tools and how they can be applied to forest restoration projects. And then our plan is to spend the majority of this talk providing live demonstrations of these tools and save time for questions. At the very end, Restore will be sharing a video about how you can share your projects on their global platform. And throughout the course of this webinar, please feel free to type your questions into the chat. Just make sure it includes your name because the Restore team will be compiling those questions so we can answer them at the end. So now to who we are.
So welcome everyone again. My name is David Rodriguez. I'm the resident biologist at Finca Cántaros Environmental Association. And I'm more than happy to be here with you.
And I'm Lily Briggs, and I'm the founder and director of Finca Cántaros Environmental Association. And together we run the organization. And like I said, we're eBird Costa Rica reviewers, and we are really excited that we have collaborations going with ETH Zurich and with Dr. Rebecca Cole. And those subjects will be coming up throughout the course of this webinar. We are also parents and avid birders, so we take our kids out birding whenever possible and engage our kids in all the activities we run at Finca Cántaros, including a recent migratory warbler count organized by eBird Costa Rica last weekend. And these are some community members participating. And so, like I said, we are going to start with an overview of what Finca Cántaros does before we dive into the tools that are pertinent to forest restoration. But I think it's worth starting with a very broad, global, important question. Why do birds matter to forest restoration? And I love this quote because it really captures the iterative nature. Birds are a key group in tropical forest restoration because they both benefit from restoration and promote forest regeneration through pollination and seed dispersal interactions. So it's a positive feedback loop. And I think that's really important to mention that we need birds in our forest restoration projects, and in turn, birds are going to benefit from restoration. And so what is Finca Cántaros Environmental Association? Well, first of all, we're based here, as I mentioned, in Costa Rica, down in the very south in a town called San Vito. We're about 20 minutes from Panama. And I founded the organization in 2020, and we now have status here in Costa Rica, as well as in Canada, where I'm from, and the United States. So we invite anyone connected to this webinar to come visit us if they're ever in San Vito. And even though you're going to be talking about, forest restoration a lot in this project, I like to put upfront that environmental education is really at the core of everything we do. And I like to say that forest restoration or forest landscape restoration, which is one of the pillars of our organization, along with birds and gender, are really the vehicles that we're using to create environmental education experiences for the community. They're the vehicle through which we're engaging the community in our projects. And the theme of environmental education is a central tenet to all of our work. And on the Restore platform, we have highlighted 4 sites that comprise the nearly 80 hectares of land that our organization is actively restoring and or conserving. And at the end of this webinar, as we mentioned, there will be a short demonstration by the Restore team to show you how you can showcase your projects on the Restore platform. And like I keep saying, we are really dedicated to community engagement. And in that theme, we focus on tree growing and not just tree planting by trying to engage audiences such as school children and women, which I'll mention in a moment, and bringing them to Finca Cántaros, not only to plant trees, but to steward trees. So we want to showcase the fact that the planting is one step in a long timeline of activities necessary to conduct successful forest restoration projects. So these kids come back to help compost their trees, or as you can see this picture, they've come to help collect seeds of a tree I love called the Ingaidulis that we can plant in our tree nursery. And one of the ways we engage kids in forest restoration is through a program called Bird Sleuth that I helped develop when I was still at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And this engages kids in learning about birds. And now we've added a component where they come to learn about restoration and how to create habitat for birds by planting in what we call the children's forest of Cotobruz here at Finca Cántaros. And again, these kids have been invited back on multiple occasions to take care of their trees. And just to see the huge difference in 5 years of converting open degraded pasture into a forest that now has shade cover and leaf litter, and having the kids experience that growth by coming back repeatedly over the course of these years to see that progress and to be a part of that progress. And we engage women in the community through our environmental education program dedicated to girls and women of all ages called Women Committed to the Earth. And one of our main activities is running a tree nursery where we cultivate the native tree species to then plant in our restoration projects. And that's why I love this definition of forest landscape restoration, which emphasizes the ongoing nature of the process and enhancing community well-being, and that forest landscape restoration is more than just planting trees. And so with that lightning round overview of what we do, like I said, we're going to dive right into Merlin and how it can be used in forest restoration projects. But since the intro to Finca Cántaros was indeed so short, we invite all of you to check us out more on our website or social media if you're interested in learning more about our work. But since the purpose of the webinar today really is to give you guys some of the nuts and bolts of Merlin and eBird, 2 tools created by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, we want to just preface this with the fact that because we have such a short amount of time and these tools are so dense, in some cases, for those of you who are completely new to the tools, it's going to be useful because we're going to start from the very beginning, at least in the case of Merlin, because otherwise it just wouldn't make sense because you wouldn't know where to get started. For those of you who are more familiar with Merlin, we hope we can provide some interesting nuggets that will make this webinar worthwhile to you. In the case of eBird, we are going to jump a little bit more advanced because David is going to showcase what some of the key tools on the eBird platform you can use specifically in forest restoration that he has found most useful. And so with that, I'll go into Merlin first. And that's because this is the tool that really helps facilitate bird identification and learning about birds in any country in the world. This application now has what are called bird packs for every location in the world. And just because, my passion is communication, I'm going to keep coming back to the fact that This tool is not only useful in helping to identify the birds that you want to monitor in your restoration projects, but can enhance community outreach and environmental education. For example, we've hosted welcome back migratory bird festivals, where we've had interns teach community members about how to use the application. And so now we have to hope that the technology gods are being kind to us today. They worked before we got on the call. But you know how it is, as soon as you start to use the technology, there's something that can go awry, but I think we're going to be okay today. Everyone cross your collective fingers. All right. I'm going to be opening the Merlin app on my phone. And everyone can see the app? Thumbs up.
Yes.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
So the technology gods were smiling on us today. So this is what the Merlin app looks like, and it is a free application that anyone can download. And like I said, we do have to start with the basics, because if you're completely new to Merlin and you want to download this app, you can, like I said, download it for free, Android or Apple phone, but you need to know how to download the appropriate bird pack. Because if you just download the application, you're going to be left going, well, what is this? Because there's not going to be anything in there for you to use. So the first steps we always like to emphasize are that when you create your username and password for the Cornell Lab in order to access these tools, that's the only sort of step you have to take. You don't have to pay anything, but you do have to share some information and create a username and password. This is going to sound silly, but I highly recommend you write down your username and password, because one of the main questions we used to get, or I used to get when I would teach workshops about this in my former life working with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, was I've lost my username or password. Now I can't log in. Okay. So really, it sounds silly, but I highly recommend, if you're going to be downloading and trying to, start playing around with this app on this webinar, to write that down. Then the next step is to ensure you're connected to Wi-Fi, because this is a heavy application, or the bird packs are heavy, and I would recommend not using data to download. And finally, making sure that you have space in your phone, because these apps, this app and these bird packs, as much as the Cornell Lab team has done a lot to try to compress the files as much as possible so they don't take up as much room on your phone, you have to think of it like you're downloading enormous thick field guides into your phone. Mm-hmm. And field guides don't come with sound recordings and things like that. So that's going to add the extra space. So we are in Costa Rica, as I mentioned, which is why I have the Costa Rica pack installed, but you can download more than one pack. So eBird is recommending that I could download the Panama pack, because we're very close to Panama, as I mentioned. And so I could choose to, download the Panama pack, but I have what is, key for me here in this area is the Costa Rica app. So yeah, just some takeaways. You can download the app for free. Make sure you then choose the appropriate bird pack by clicking on bird pack here. And you can also select whether you want to, what language you would like to see the names appear. And there's, as you can see, multiple languages to choose from. However, even in a small country like Costa Rica, bird names can vary from one place to another. So I have the language set to Spanish. Sometimes that can be a bit confusing if I go to another part of Costa Rica and that bird has another local name. So we find it helpful to include the scientific names so that you do have that universal system for naming the birds. And so you can, choose your settings here. What will the common name language be, whether you want to show scientific names or not. And that's how you get yourself set up to see what will appear under Explore Birds. So if you can see on the bottom bar there, I've just clicked on Explore. Going from left to right, you see Identify, Explore, Life List, and Settings. And because of we want to pack so much in, I'm going to jump around a little bit and not necessarily go in order. But I wanted to move over to Explore Birds so that you can see that with the Costa Rica bird pack that I've downloaded, all the birds of Costa Rica are appearing, and I can scroll down here and see them organized taxonomically.
Or most of them.
Yeah, most of them, exactly. Yeah. Obviously, things are changing with climate change. Species are changing distributions, but this is the most updated version or updated list of birds. So now to go into identify, which is what everyone gets the most use out of. You can see there's a few different ways to identify birds, especially for beginners. These tools are really powerful. And the sound ID option is something that the Cornell team recently, well, I guess maybe about a year ago or so, a bit more, but it's more recent, let's say, in the lifeline of, or the timeline of Merlin's life. And so with the sound ID, you can use it to literally try to detect birds in your surrounding. And even though you won't be able to hear the sound that we're playing, you will get to see how it pops up as the sound is playing. So David is actually using the sound ID. He's using a sound recording on Merlin on his phone to have it show up on my phone. And again, going back to the idea that, or the understanding that on this webinar, there could be a very broad spectrum of people with different levels of expertise and familiarity with Merlin. If you're completely new to this, it's going to be great because for right now, mostly the most common birds are going to be showing up in sound ID. As you can see on my screen, it says sound ID knows 60% of the likely birds here. And that's because Merlin advances the more we use it. So through machine learning, the more we share sound recordings, the more we use Merlin, and always a good idea to click, this is my bird, because that is how the machine learning will advance. But the idea is that if you're very new to birds in your area, the sound ID will be more useful with respect to common species. And those of you who have a very advanced knowledge of the birds in your area and might need help identifying a bird in your forest restoration plot that is something you've never heard before, it might not necessarily be as helpful to you until this app advances, or depending on your location. Because of course, given the fact that the Cornell Lab is located in Ithaca, New York in the United States, right now in the US and Canada, sound ID is the most advanced, but it is catching up very quickly. And especially in countries like Costa Rica, where there's a lot of people flocking here, excuse the pun, to observe birds, there's more and more machine learning taking place. So would you like to play another sound just to see?
No, just one other thing is because here in the tropics, we have this huge biodiversity of birds, and some species have 10 even more sounds sounds between sings and calls. So for the tropics, it's a bit more complicated for the app to be like 100% accurate. So it works very well in the North Hemisphere, where there are less density and biodiversity of birds, but here in the tropics, it's a bit challenging for the app, but it's still good. Yes. So let's play another sound.
And so if we were actually outside and we're hearing multiple birds at once, and we can't be playing multiple songs at one time on the phone, the app would actually be detecting and showing multiple sounds at once. So if we were able to play the toucan call and the buff-throated saltire call at the same time, those would all be appearing in a series on Sound ID, which is a little bit tricky for us to demonstrate in a webinar. So that is the sound ID feature. Another useful feature for both beginner and more advanced birders is the photo ID option. And so in this case, you can either take a photo if the bird happens to be close enough to you to take a photo, which isn't usually the case, or choose a photo. And in this case, we're going to go back to our friend here, the yellow-throated toucan. And if I click next, it's a good idea to input where the location and date of the observation, and the date will come up automatically. And then you can click identify, and here you see the yellow-throated toucan appearing. And so if I go to this is my bird, you can either take it to eBird to report as part of an eBird checklist, which we'll be getting to shortly, or you can save with Merlin. And this gives you an option to share more details about your bird and your observation. And then it'll be interesting if you want to then learn more about the yellow-throated toucan, you can go to, well, we've already done This Is My Bird, pardon me. And then, let's see. Another way to find that bird in the Merlin app is to type it in here in the Explore Birds menu. And this is the same for any species in your particular country and in the bird pack that you've downloaded. You are able to look at, some photos. If you toggle to what's my right, you'll see the species, adult. In the case of sexual dimorphism, you'll see male, female photos. So you can get a breadth of different photos of that particular species. You can also get a description of the species, see and hear its sounds. And like David said, there's so many sounds. And in different countries, a bird will have a different variation on a call or a song. So that's another important thing to keep in mind when using this tool. And you can see a range map. So it's a very comprehensive tool. Like I said, it really is a field guide condensed into an application. And then finally, before we move on to eBird, another tool is the step-by-step app. And so again, this is often most useful if you're beginning to get into birds and you want to build capacity to do bird monitoring in your forest restoration plots. This feature asks you to answer 5 simple questions, starting with where did you see the bird? So you'll see that Merlin has actually shared my recent locations. So I'll share that we're here in Cotobruz, Punta Arenas. That's the name of the county. The date comes up automatically. And this is, of course, important, especially if you have migratory birds in your area that will be present at certain times of the year, but not at other times. And so, for example, if I want to identify the national bird of Costa Rica, which is the clay-colored thrush, I will click here, robin size or thrush size. And the clay-colored thrush happens to be just a buff brown, but you could select up to 3 main colors. And typically, they're sort of hopping around on the ground, foraging. So this will create a list of possible birds. And there it is, the clay-colored thrush, the national bird of Costa Rica, coming up as the first option. But if I scroll down, I can see other options. And it is always good to click, This Is My Bird. And you can either save with Merlin or take me to eBird, depending on your choice. This is actually a newer feature of Merlin as well, because in the past, Merlin was just for bird ID and eBird was for submitting observations. But now they've become more interconnected, and you can actually save share bird observations through Merlin. But given our time restraints, we're not going to go into that today. We're actually going to switch gears now to talk very briefly about our forest restoration projects, so that we can then link it to how we are using eBird in our restoration projects. So I'm going to open back up my slides again and note that, as I mentioned in the beginning, we are collaborating with the Cornell Lab and the Global Experiments Network on different projects. The 2 that we'll be sharing here include the Assisted Restoration versus Natural Regeneration project, as well as the Functional Diversity project. And as part of these efforts, we are doing bird monitoring. And just to note that, again, we always engage the community in planting, but not necessarily just kids or women. In this case, we had international students and we had community members at large, including the municipality and some local businesses. So now David will share a little bit more about the bird component of this project.
So yes, we would like to use this project as an example of how we are using eBird to keep the data in a place. I have to say that we are using another kind of protocol. Like the main protocol is like manually. So I'm taking notes of every single bird, every single sign that I have through different point counts. But I'm also using the app because, well, I like to use it too. So this project, like one of the main focus of the project is to see how bird communities are changing among the time and this project is developed. So saying this, that's the next one here. So we do these surveys 3 times per year. It's in 3 different sites. So we have a secondary forest, a plantation, and open areas because we want to compare those habitats. So in the past slide was that information that I didn't mention, but there is 1 site in Mexico and 4 sites here in Costa Rica. So there are 5 sites in total, and those sites are distributed in 4 live zones. So in each site, we have 18 point counts. So 3 point counts in the secondary forest, 3 point counts in plantation, and 3 point counts in open areas.
And David's going to share now how he uses eBird as a way to document all that data in one place. Although, like he said, he's also old school and does the notes manually as well as a backup. And it's worth mentioning before we dive into the eBird component that one of the sites he does the point count is in a forest restoration plot as part of Finca Cántaros land called Bosque Mágico. And then another area is the Loma Linda field station. And so to switch gears once again to the eBird app, and then we will link this together. eBird is another tool platform created by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology that allows anyone, anywhere to share their lists of bird observations. And eBird allows you to find more birds, keep track of your bird list, photos and sounds, join the world's largest birding community, but in keeping with the theme of this talk, contribute to science and conservation. And so we'll go to the platform where David will show you one of his tools that has been most useful. And if we have time after that, we will be showing you a quick demo on the actual app itself, how you can take an actual list. But again, we're trying to balance the fact that there's going to be a very broad range of people with a broad range of expertise on this call. So we decided to share this trip report method because it's proved very useful in our bird survey.
Exactly, because we don't have enough time, like Lily is saying. So what I would like to show you, it's this option that eBird give us, which is called trip reports. So through this option, we can put together several checklists of 1 day or of several days. In this case, what I'm doing is putting a checklist from 4 days. So 2 days, I was taking data here in this area where is Finca Cántaros located. Well, in this case, this is Bosque Mágico, where we have the project. And also there is this other area where is Loma Linda field station located. So there are 2, I was taking data 2 days here and 2 days here.
And the name of the trip report is an acronym for the Functional Diversity Project, which was on a previous slide of ours, where we said we have these 2 restoration projects that we're involved with through Global Experiment Networks, and one is the Functional Diversity Project. So David is able to label this trip report as Functional Diversity, or FDIV for short. And yes, continue.
Yes. So as you can see, the app gives us the opportunity to see all the checklists that I already submit with the date and the time. And if I go to each checklist, the app will give me all this information. So I can see the coordinates in the map, on the map. And also, well, the protocol that I'm using is because there are point counts. So I'm just using the stationary observation type option. But there are some other options that you can also choose. Of course, if you have your own research, well, it will be a bit complicated if that option, I mean, the observation type option is not in the app. But the option as a tool has several options are very handy. Yes, like the Pro Alas monitoring protocol bird community. So this is for, yes, all the checklists that I submitted. So here it says that there were 154 species. And so this is the name of the project or the research that we are doing. And so here, well, this is the photo lifers that I got during the time that I was doing these observations.
And so you can see that the tools are very comprehensive in that sense that you can share your data, your list, you can include photos. David could even upload sound recordings as well.
Mm-hmm. And another important part about this app is like if you want to get like into more details about information of the species, you can click on the species name and boom, there is a whole, this is like a rabbit hole. You have to be careful because you can spend hours checking information about the species that you are submitted. But so saying that, the most important part from here is, okay, so how can I download all this data? This is like one of the most common questions that we always have from people use eBird. And unfortunately, the app as a thing cannot download we can download the app directly from the app. But if you want to do that, you just have to send an email to the eBird Central, to the eBird
eBird Central team.
eBird Central team. Yes, thank you. And so they will send you a link where you can copy this, but you have to copy the link of the after you create the trip report. So you just copy this link and then get into the link that they will provide you, which is called eBird checklist compiler or
compiler.
Compiler, thank you, sir. And so I just have to paste the link. And then there are these options in case you may want to do some changes in the data sheet the website will provide you. But in this case, let's keep it like this. And so we just have to wait like 15 seconds or so. So according to what eBird says, they are working on develop this function into their own website, but it's still undeveloped, like I'm saying. So
this is something really important to note about eBird and Merlin as well, is they evolve, these two tools have evolved very fast. So things are constantly changing and being updated. And so we just learned actually in the process of preparing for this very webinar that now there is the option to even download a spreadsheet. But as David is saying, it does require sending an email, getting in touch with eBird Central team. So now the data is finished downloading. So David will open it. And then I'll just switch over to the file. And you can see this is what the output looks like. And so this provides compiled spreadsheet of all the data from those point counts. And so in the interest of time, we're happy to answer more questions either at the end of this talk or via email after the webinar is over about this. But we do want an opportunity to show you quickly how the eBird app actually looks on the phone. Because especially we've noticed that outside of Canada and the United States, most people never open eBird on the browser, but instead open it on their phone. So I think it's really critical that we have an opportunity to show you what eBird looks like on the phone. And to note again that like Merlin, eBird is also a free download, and you will need a Cornell username and password to log in.
Well, the same one. The same account that you
point.
Yeah, from Merlin. Yes.
And so again, the importance of having that information saved somewhere. So I'm logged into my my Cornell account, which gives me access to eBird and Merlin. And this is what it looks like on the home page. So for example, we can hear some birds outside our window here. We're always listening to birds. And if we want to start a checklist, I have all the names coming up in scientific names, again, for that consistency. But for example, let's go back to our toucan friend, and its scientific name is Ramphastos ambiguus. So if I, want to note that I heard or saw one yellow-throated toucan, as you might have noticed, I typed in first the number, so that can be 1, it can be 4, and then I can start typing in the name. But if you're still new to birding, you can put this into like English or whatever your first language is, to help facilitate the process more easily. And another cool thing about the way that eBird and Merlin sort of speak to one another is if I click on my toucan observation, oops, you see that what happened there was I had typed in 4, so it automatically added to the number. If I want to change that, I click on the toucan and I can edit the number observed or heard. eBird checklists allow you to include not just, birds that you're seeing, but also birds that you're hearing. And often the checklists that we do in the morning on a daily basis are a lot of heard birds rather than seeing them. We're not looking out our window right now because we're looking at all of you through this webinar, but we're hearing birds. So we can edit the number observed like this. And if I do want more details about this or any other species that I'm inputting into my list, I can click on Merlin, and because I have the app open, it will take me to the page about the toucan and allow me to read and see more details. And then if I want to go back to my eBird checklist, I can click here where it's showing like a live, there's a list in action. And if I then want to go back to the main list, I just click here and the whole species list for Costa Rica comes up. And some people prefer to see the whole list in front of them. Some people find that a little bit overwhelming. So you can click on the check mark at the bottom here where it says 1, because I've only inputted 1 species so far into this list. And if I click on that, I'm just going to see the species that I've entered. And that way, as we go along, if I hear more individuals of the same species of bird, I can keep adding to that just by clicking on the number. However, it is, a good idea to be careful in terms of how many individuals you're adding. You want to try to avoid double counting. And if you're going birding, or sorry, if you're doing bird monitoring with maybe 2 or 3 people, you also have to be very coordinated in that sense and make sure you're not double counting individuals, and that only one person is submitting a list for that bird monitoring activity. And you can click on the location symbol to try to note where you're birding, and you'll see that there are saved locations in your personal eBird, the more lists that you're doing in more different places. So we're going to click the location we're currently at. We're not at Finca Cántaros, we're at our home. So then we would use this location, and then that would come up here. And you can see on the left, there's a clock running, so it shows you the time and the distance. We're going to be doing a stationary count because we're not moving anywhere. And let's just add 1 more species just because to make it more interesting. Yeah, so the house wren, which you're hearing all the time outside our house, is this Troglodytes eidon. So we'll add that. And then if we click stop, just to show you what it looks like at the end, you'll see that the protocol for this observation is that it shows the date, the time, location. We did a stationary rather than a traveling or an incidental count. And there's all kinds of protocols you can use. Earlier, David referenced the ProALAS, but depending on where you are and what level of monitoring you're engaging in for your forest restoration, all of this might not be necessary. So you could choose something like the traveling or the stationary. And then you also can share that list with other observers in your group. Like I said, if you're doing your bird monitoring with more than 1 person, you can add observers and you can share a checklist. And again, eBird will save the different people that you have shared lists with in the past. And so you want to make sure the time is there. And you always, if possible, want to note that, in this case is not a complete checklist, so I wouldn't submit this list. This is for demonstration purposes only. But what eBird is trying to avoid to ensure that the best quality data is being inputted is that you're not just inputting, you know, the exciting and interesting species for you. Even if they're very common species, like maybe you don't want to enter turkey vultures because they're all over the place and they don't seem as interesting to you. It's very important to enter all the species and not just sort of maybe one bird that you were targeting on that particular birding day. And this doesn't apply as much to bird monitoring, because I'm sure if you are going out to bird monitor, you already have that sensibility of wanting to include everything in the landscape, but it's still important to note. So with that, we're going to go back to our presentation to wrap up with some of the key points. So we've discussed the trip reports, and again, we're happy to, you know, share our contact info at the end, and you can reach out to us with any questions about these particular points. But just to kind of summarize, you know, the ways that Merlin and then eBird are both useful tools for forest restoration practitioners. Obviously, you know, the bird ID is incredibly useful, education and training, real-time monitoring and data integration. You have access to a global database, and you're supporting citizen science and conservation initiatives. In terms of eBird, like I said, this is the main application to be used for submitting bird observation lists and compiling your scientific data, but also for engaging the community, using them for planning and management tools, and you're connected to it's really enormous and amazing knowledge network. And it's also just worth emphasizing again, I know we've said this multiple times on the webinar, but it bears repeating that both of these applications are free, and there are many free training opportunities out there. This webinar can be seen as kind of an intro, but we can connect you with all kinds of people doing trainings in all kinds of different languages, in all kinds of different countries, for all kinds of different projects all over the world. And that's a great way for your organization doing forest restoration to have access to tools. And the reason I think it's important to stress that, you know, this is a free resource and there are many free capacity building opportunities is because something that Dr. Rebecca Cole and her colleagues noted in a paper focused on motivations for restoration is that, you know, efforts to quantify biodiversity recovery were not as common, despite this being at the top, one of the top motivations for restoration. And one of the indicators, or one of the things they noted as a potential reason for the misalignment is that there are prohibitive costs of monitoring. Now, of course, there's still, you know, costs in monitoring in terms of the human resources and time and whatnot. But the fact that there are tools that are free to help you, I think, is really important to note in forest restoration, especially when you're thinking of developing a bird monitoring component. And so with that, here is some info about us, and we can put this slide up again at the very end. But we'll move now to questions so that we have time to also share the video of Restore.
Okay, thank you so much, Lily and David. This was such an informative session, and we learned a lot for sure. And huge thanks to Carly too from the audience, because she's been answering a lot of questions from the chat. So this is the kind of the interaction we'd like to have in our community. We're very happy about it. I gathered some questions. Some of them, as I said, Carly already answered, and at such an advanced level. Thank you so much, Carly. But other ones here. Geoffrey Chen asked, for beginning birders who are still developing their ID skills, how accurate is Merlin in identifying? For example, how many repeated Merlin suggestions would you need in one session to confirm that bird is in fact the right one and not the wrong one?
Well, that's a very good question, because as we shared before, it's machine learning. So the more data you put into the machine, the better, right? So it depends. It's hard to say like a specific number, because it depends on different circumstances.
And the species in question.
Yes, the habitat where you are, but normally the app, it's very accurate. Yes, like I said, especially if you are in the north hemisphere or in the south hemisphere, where there are less density and biodiversity of species.
So we've noticed, for example, that's why we did the demo with two very common species in our area, and Merlin Sound ID, for example, immediately detected it. But we did a test with this with a more obscure species that's not as common, and it's not in as many checklists, and it didn't come up. So, you know, that's referring to sound ID. Same goes with the step-by-step ID. I find also if it's something that's not as common, like the clay-colored thrush is very common, so that definitely will come up if you put in the info, but sometimes with more obscure species, and like David keeps saying, here in the tropics, especially in this area with so much biodiversity, it's more challenging.
Yes, because some species are very rare, so there is not enough information yet. So the app needs more sounds of that species to be more accurate with that specific species. While some other species, like for example, wrens, the New World wrens, they have like a whole repertoire of different sounds. So sometimes they have 15, even more sounds. So it's a bit challenging for the app for sure. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for that question.
Another one, let's see. So Sonia da Vega asked, if you're not sure about which bird was seen or heard, do you add all the options to the checklist?
Can you maybe clarify a bit if you're not sure all the birds or cedar, like, oh, you're saying that if you are a new birder and you can't identify all the sounds around you, do you can you still submit a checklist? Is that the question?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really great question. That comes up a lot because people worry that if they can't identify, you know, all, you know, there might be 100 species out there and you can't identify all of them, but you're making your best effort to identify what you're able to. Yes, you can still check identifying all the birds you are able to accurately detect. So for example, when I first moved here 5 years ago, I could barely identify like 5 species. And so I did my very best, and I would always include, you know, the ones I was most confident about, like the clay-colored thrush, or another bird that's very common around here, like the scarlet rump tanager. Like I said, up to 5 species that I was sure about and I saw regularly until I gained more and more confidence and experience. And so I could submit a checklist of 5 species and say, you know, identifying all the birds that I can accurately detect. And eBird even has done research looking at the learning curves of its users that, you know, relate the observer experience with the increasing number of birds on the checklist.
And there is also the scenario where you cannot identify a specific sound of a bird that you saw. So that's not a problem. That's completely fine. So you just have to, the app will give you an option that says, are you able to identify all the species? So you just mark like, no, and that's totally fine.
Okay, then let's go to the next one. It was from Ekaterina. She said, I am running a restoration project in South Portugal. There are a lot of hunters in the area who shoot also birds, specifically song thrush, Turdus philomelos. Do you have any observations on how hunting seasons affect the behavior and vocalization of the surviving birds?
Wow, that's a very interesting question.
Yeah.
That's a bit out of my range of expertise. Perhaps there's somebody else on this call who will be able to respond to that, or, you know, we'd love to keep this conversation going post webinar. So maybe we can share contact info and look more deeply into this. I would be hesitant to answer that question without having some more knowledge.
Yeah, no, it's hard to get into like a specific answer for that question because it's quite complicated to get that data, right?
I guess what I will say is I have seen studies noting that birds have adapted their vocalizations according to human modifications to the environment. So for example, they've done studies of birds in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, singing earlier. In fact, it's a kind of thrush that would sing even earlier in the morning before dawn to be heard over the noise of the city that would pick up later in the morning that it got. So there are examples like that, but we could share contact information after this webinar and do some more research into that. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, it's always good to have material to keep the discussion further.
Absolutely.
Let's see another one. Yeah, this one I think Carly already answered, but maybe you want to add some input here. Abigail asked, is there really now a Merlin for Indonesia? I have really enjoyed in France and miss it here. And she also asked, so eBird does not work on laptop or desktop, but it can import an Excel sheet?
Sorry, that was a point I should have more clearly. Yeah, but with respect to eBird, you can submit checklists from the laptop or the phone. The point I was trying to make earlier is that typically people submit checklists from their phone because they're out birding and they have their phone and they're keeping a list, which is way more practical. Or no, depending on who you are, it doesn't have to be more practical, but a lot of people prefer to enter the data immediately as they're birding on their phone rather than writing it down old school and then entering it later from their laptop. But you can enter on your laptop, and the list that you enter from your phone, you can download that data later from the laptop, because all the data that you enter from your phone is going to a huge global database, and that is accessible through the platform, on your laptop, and well, of course, from your browser on your phone as well. So I hope that answers that second half of the question. Do you mind repeating the first half? I think it was about whether Merlin is available in Indonesia.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
My understanding is that there are bird packs now in every part of the world, but I'd be actually curious to hear what Carly shared about the answer, because it sounds like she has lots of Merlin knowledge. So can you read what Carly responded?
Let me see it again. And Carly, if you want to jump in, please feel free.
Yeah, please.
Oh, it's somewhere here in the chat.
Because what you should do is just check all the bird package that comes in the app and check if there's the option of Indonesia. I'm pretty sure that there should be one, especially in a place like that, because where you have a lot of
Diversity.
Exactly, diversity and important species. Oh, see?
Yeah, Carly said, Carly said the sound recognition only works for around 1,000 species, largely biased to the global north.
Yes, exactly. So it's getting better and better in other parts of the world, but there is often a lag time. It was the same when Merlin was first launched, that it was better at IDing birds in the north, particularly in the United States and Canada. But as more and more users started using the app in other parts of the world, then it became more and more useful in those places. And because Merlin, the Cornell Lab says on its website to learn about birds in any country, that's why we're assuming that there are bird packs for Indonesia. But to be perfectly honest, we haven't looked for the bird pack for Indonesia. We haven't had the privilege of going to Indonesia yet to see if we need a bird pack for there. But my understanding is that there is a bird pack. So wherever you are in the world today connecting, and again, we thank you so much for joining us, whatever time zone you may be in, you can look when you download the Merlin app what bird packs are suggested to you.
Oh, my colleague Anita is from Indonesia and she has raised her hand. And Anita, I think you can go on and share the video too.
Yeah, this is actually not my expertise, but I know that there is an eBird community here in Indonesia. And also like a local one, a very local one called Burungnesia, that probably has more database compared to the eBird. And I think I saw their results around last year, and it's kind of similar, like the result from eBird and then the result from Burungnesia. And I'm happy to connect you in case you want to connect with them.
Excellent. Thank you. And I see now we're up at, we have about 5 minutes left in our space. So I would like to wrap up our section and pass the floor over to the Restore team to share their demonstration. And I'll just put this slide up one more time in case anyone wants to screenshot it and be in touch with us. There's so much more we could have talked about. We've literally done workshops of 2-3 days about this subject. So an hour is really barely scratching the surface, but we appreciate everyone's interest and are very happy to stay in touch and follow up with any questions. Oh, Anissa, is your hand still up or do you have another? Is it just from before?
Thank you so much, Lily and David. This was an amazing session. Sorry, David, did you want to say anything?
No. In case if there are more questions, we are more than happy to answer them. You just need to send us to us and we will figure out how to give it to you back.
Thank you all so much.
We'll send a follow-up message to all the registrants and
Perfect. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, so thank you so much. That was an amazing session. And we just wanted to show a video to you because we know everybody here are part of amazing restoration or conservation initiatives and they are all welcome to Restore. So this is a small intro video to our platform. Anissa, please feel free to share the video.
Hello everyone, welcome to Restore. To access Restore, you can go to www.restore.eco on your browser. Signing up for an account will give you the best experience out of Restore. You can sign in using a Google account or any other email address you have. Once you are signed in, you can start exploring. This is our landing page. Restore is available in 7 languages. You can change the language by clicking the 3 lines on the upper right-hand side. On the right side, you can see toggles for data layers, map settings, and other features which can help you explore the map. We are now exploring the sites, which can be the areas of restoration, conservation, and sustainable land use initiatives. I'll take you to one of my favorite restoration sites. This is a site profile of a mangrove restoration initiative in Indonesia. The site profile contains information about the initiative, such as the name, organization, photos of the sites and activities, and contact information that can be shared through various social media platforms. And you can also embed your site on Restore through your own website by copying this code and pasting it to your website script. The site profile will also contain auto-generated scientific insights based on the best scientific publications and global dataset available. Here, you can see the data for biodiversity, tree, shrub, and herb species, carbon storage in above and below ground biomass as well as soil, net primary productivity, land and tree cover, and UVI, water, and other environmental metrics. On the About tab, you can see a more detailed description about the initiative, including when the initiative started, what goals they have, what kind of support they need, and also a button to get direction on Google Maps. Restore also allows you to co-manage the sites, and on this Connection tab, you can see the people and organizations who are involved in this initiative, allowing collaboration and better connectivity. One of the most powerful features on Restore, beside the scientific data, is the 2 high-resolution imagery that can be accessed directly on the map. Restore hosts the Esri Wayback that is available globally on 50 to 30 cm resolution, and Planet NICFI that is available biannually for tropical areas with 4.8 meter resolution. Using this feature, you can visually track how the lands change over time and showcase your restoration and conservation impact. Another exciting feature is you can visualize the data layers on the map and put it side by side with the graph to better understand about the impacts. Now I will show you how to add a site. Adding a site to Restore is quite straightforward. You can click Add to Map, New Site, and you have 2 options. You can upload your geofile using these formats, or, just like what I'm doing here, you can click to directly form the boundary on the map. When you are done, you can click Analyze Area to get the preview of the scientific insights, and then you can click Save as a Site. You will be directed to a few pages to fill in information about your initiatives. You can add descriptions, photos, and at the end of this process, you can publish the site and access it anytime on the map. Besides sites, Restore can also host points of interest, which are point location of activities such as tree nurseries, botanical garden, offices, educational center, and many others. Restore also allows you to manage sites into collections, which are theme folder of public sites. You can add any public site into a collection on Restore. Besides organizing sites into collections, you can also link your site, point of interest, and collections into an organization profile. By having an organization profile, you will be able to showcase your portfolio to get better visibility and connectivity. In the future, we are planning to release aggregated insights, which allows organizations to measure impacts across their portfolio using the collection feature. Restore also wants to connect implementers on the ground to funding. You can access the funding opportunity page on Restore, find the suitable one according to your region and goals, and see more details on how to apply. Please look forward to our upcoming updates. You can check the latest update through our notification button. If you need any support, don't hesitate to access our support page or send us a message. Happy restoring!
So thank you everyone for attending this session. This is a QR code for our next session. Please feel free to scan it. And yeah, thank you so much, the guest speakers. It was amazing.
It was great to be with you this morning. Have a great rest of your day or night, wherever you may be.
Ciao, pura vida.
Ciao.
You too. Bye.